Sir David, by asking, in your experience, working around the world over a number of decades, what for you is the most striking impact of climate change that you have experienced firsthand?
I think the most vivid probably was a few years ago, sadly, now, was on the Barrier Reef. I first went to the Barrier Reef in the 1950s, and I was a young underwater swimmer, diver, and I remember it's the most vivid memory of mine, almost of my natural history life, the extraordinary experience of diving on a reef and suddenly seeing this multitude of fantastically beautiful forms of animals that you'd never seen before, fishes of all kinds, organisms of all kinds that you didn't really know what they were, even you were supposed to be a zoologist. There are more individuals and more variety of life there than on a coral reef than anywhere else in the world, even more than the tropical rainforest. And I'm not a very good underwater swimmer, but I've been there a number of times. And I will never forget diving on a reef, which was about 10 years ago now, and suddenly seeing that instead of this multitude of wonderful forms of life, that it was stark white. It had bleached white because of the rising temperatures and the increasing acidity of the sea. And you may say, well, it was beauty and all that complexity and interests you as a naturalist. That's true. But in fact, it's crucial to the world because coral reefs, about 30 to 40% of all oceanic fish throughout the seas, depend upon the coral reefs at some time of their lives. And if you lose, because they either spawn there or they're fish there that grow up, it's a nursery of the reef. And if you wipe that out, you wipe out whole areas of the ocean. And the notion that somehow we had stopped this, the oceans on which we depend for our food, and so many nations around the world do, is appalling. And that was the first time that I really thought, because the notion, a particular rhinoceros may disappear. It's sad to people who care about natural history and rhinoceroses, but it didn't strike me that the whole population of the world is going to be affected, as it now is. The other time I have seen evidence was in South Georgia, in the Antarctic, just outside the Antarctic Circle, which is the richest form of Antarctic life, of thousands, hundreds of thousands of penguins and seals and so on. And I stood, first time I went there was about 30 years ago, and I had stood at the bottom of a glacier. And 10 years ago I went back and stood in the same place, and the glacier wasn't even visible. It had just retracted. Now, skeptics will say, I can take you to another place where the glaciers grew or something, and I can take you to a place where the coral reefs are flourishing. So it's very difficult to pick one point, which is one site at which you can actually say that's a proof. It isn't. It's just an example. The proof is in the graphs. The proof is in the scientific records. The proof is in when you analyse bubbles from the sea ice and glacier ice to show you what has happened to the climate over the years. That's what the proof is. But the illustrations are those two.